Imagine a world where your car doesn't need gas, doesn't need a driver, and might even fix itself when broken. Sounds like science fiction, right? Well, that's not the future. It's happening right now. And did you know the very first car wasn't powered by gasoline? It was electric. Surprising, isn't it? But how did we go from a quiet electric car to roaring gas engines and now back to electric? Well, get ready for a mind-blowing journey through the history of cars, where we'll uncover the shocking twists and forgotten secrets of the vehicles that changed the world. Before engines ever took over, humans relied on animals to pull carts. Horses, donkeys, and oxen dragged goods and people from place to place. It was slow, tiring, and messy. But as cities grew and trade expanded, people began dreaming of something faster. But as human curiosity grew, so did the desire to invent something faster. This led to one of the earliest experiments with powered vehicles in the 18th century: steam engines. In 1769, Nicholas Joseph Cugnot built a steam-powered wagon. It was huge and clunky, with a boiler at the front puffing steam to power its movements. Now, this wasn't your modern-day car. I mean, it barely crawled along at 2.5 miles an hour and had to stop often to recharge steam. Still though, it was revolutionary. But Cugnot's invention wasn't just slow, it was also very hard to control. In fact, it caused the world's first recorded car accident when it crashed into a stone wall in France. Luckily, no one was killed in the crash, but it was a clear sign that these early steam vehicles weren't quite ready for the public roads. By the 1800s, inventors across Europe were still experimenting, but a major breakthrough came in 1886 with Carl Benz. His invention, the Benz patent motor wagon, was the first true gasoline-powered car. With just 3 wheels and a small engine, it didn't look like much, but it marked the beginning of modern cars. Interestingly enough, Benz's wife, Bertha, secretly borrowed the car for a road trip to visit her mother, covering 60 miles. She became the first person to drive a car long distance and proved to the world that this invention was practical. If Bertha hadn't taken that risk, who knows if gasoline cars would have taken off so quickly. But here's something that very few people know. Electric cars were also competing at the same time. In fact, the world's first electric vehicle was built even earlier than the Benz's car. In 1828, Alois Jedlik, a Hungarian engineer, created a small electric motor that powered a tiny model car. By the 1890s, electric cars were actually more popular than gasoline cars. They were quieter, didn't emit smoke, and were easier to start. In fact, by 1900, electric vehicles made up a third of all cars on US roads. But electric cars had one big problem: battery life. They couldn't go far without needing a recharge. Gasoline engines, though, on the other hand, could go much farther and were cheaper to produce. That's why they won the race in the long run. By the early 1900s, the car industry was filled with a variety of options. For example, the Baker Electric, popular with women, was clean and quiet but had limited range. Meanwhile, steam-powered cars like the Stanley Steamer could reach impressive speeds for their time, up to 75 miles an hour, but required long startup times and frequent water refills. Gasoline-powered cars, such as the 1901 Curved-Dash Oldsmobile, began to stand out for their efficiency and reliability, thanks to improvements in internal combustion engines. The Oldsmobile became the first mass-produced car in America, helping to pave the way for future innovations. Around the same time, manufacturers like Ransom Olds were perfecting assembly techniques, using simple lines to increase production. However, it was Henry Ford who revolutionized the industry in 1913. Before Henry Ford, cars were a luxury for the rich. They were slow to build and expensive. I mean, imagine spending 12 hours just to put one car together. Ford thought, why not speed this process up so everyone can own a car? In 1913, he introduced the assembly line, which completely changed the game. Instead of just one worker building an entire car, each worker focused on just one task, and the car moved along the line. This simple change cut production time down to just 90 minutes. And here's something that might surprise you. By 1927, Ford's factory could produce a new car every 24 seconds. Can you imagine building a car faster than most people brew a cup of coffee? Ford's innovation didn't just speed things up, it brought prices down too. The Model T, Ford's most famous car, became the first automobile that average people could afford. It was nicknamed the Tin Lizzie, and by the time production ended, Ford had sold over 15 million of them. What many people don't know is that Ford didn't just make cars cheaper, he paid his workers more too. In 1914, he shocked the business world by doubling his workers' wages to $5 a day, which was unheard of at the time. Why? Because he wanted his workers to afford the very cars they were building. That was revolutionary thinking. After World War II, the car industry boomed like never before. With economies recovering, people wanted to drive, and automakers delivered. This era, often called the golden age of automobiles, was when cars became more than just transportation. They became symbols of freedom, power, and style. Classic models like the Ford Mustang, Chevrolet Corvette, and Cadillac Eldorado hit the roads. These cars weren't just fast, they looked sleek and bold. In fact, many of the designs from the period were inspired by jet planes, with tail fins and chrome dominating the style. What's even more interesting is how car culture exploded in the 1950s and 60s. Drive-in theaters, road trips, and car clubs became huge parts of American life. And here's a little known fact. During this time, manufacturers purposely built cars to go out of style, something called planned obsolescence. It wasn't just about speed anymore, it was about status. Owning a flashy car meant you had made it. The oil crisis of the 1970s, though, flipped the auto industry on its head. For the first time, the US had to deal with fuel shortages, and long lines at gas stations became very common. Automakers had to adjust quickly. Gone were the days of oversized engines and high horsepower. Instead, companies started focusing on making cars smaller, lighter, and more fuel efficient. This crisis paved the way for fuel-efficient Japanese cars like Toyota and Honda, who were already making cars that were efficient and affordable. These smaller, more efficient vehicles quickly became popular, and by the end of the 70s, Japanese automakers were dominating the market. Speaking of alternative energy, there's an intriguing mystery from this time as well. Stanley Meyer, an inventor in the 1990s, claimed to have developed a water-powered car. His system, called the water fuel cell, allegedly split water into hydrogen and oxygen, using the hydrogen as fuel to power the car. If true, this would have made gasoline engines obsolete, but Meyer's invention never saw the light of day in a big way. The reason? Meyer's sudden and mysterious death in 1998. According to reports, in 1998, during dinner with investors, Meyer suddenly ran outside, clutching his throat, and collapsed, saying, "They poisoned me." His death was officially attributed to a brain aneurysm, but conspiracy theories arose, suggesting that he was silenced by oil companies or government agents to suppress his invention, fearing it would disrupt the global oil industry. To this very day, no one has been able to prove whether Meyer's water-powered car was a hoax or a genuine breakthrough. His patents exist, but they lack enough detail for others to replicate his work, leaving the truth shrouded in mystery. In the 1980s and 1990s, cars went from mechanical machines to digital marvels, and it changed everything. You might not realize it, but those beeping sounds and electronic dials in cars today, that all started back then. Car manufacturers began adding computers and electronics to their designs, leading to some game-changing innovations. Before it came standard, stopping quickly on wet roads could be a gamble. ABS, though, changed that by preventing wheels from locking up, giving drivers far more control. And then came fuel injection, which replaced carburetors and made cars faster, cleaner, and more efficient. Remember when using a paper map was a thing? Well, that's when GPS navigation came in, forever changing how we travel. And not only that, Japanese car makers like Toyota and Honda led the way with reliable tech-filled cars like the Camry and Accord. These models became famous for their tech innovators and affordability, pushing the competition to step up their game. Okay, did you know that Toyota produces 13,000 cars per day, while Ferrari only makes 14? Quite the contrast. But in the early 2000s, electric vehicles, or EVs, came back, and Tesla took the lead. Many people thought EVs were boring, slow, or just for environmentalists. But Tesla's Model S, coming out in 2012, it was fast, sleek, and stylish. It showed the world that electric cars didn't have to be boring. They could be the future. And Tesla wasn't alone. Nissan also introduced the Leaf, and Chevrolet came out with the Bolt, making EVs more accessible. Even companies like Rivian are jumping in, creating rugged all-electric trucks. And the Chinese EV market is dominating the world, with companies like BYD leading the charge. What's mind-blowing is that BYD is offering EVs starting as low as $10,000. What's really cool is that we're not just talking about cool designs or powerful engines. These EVs are leading a green revolution. They produce zero emissions, helping fight climate change. And as charging stations pop up everywhere, driving an electric car is becoming easier than ever. Let's talk about the future of cars. We've touched on self-driving vehicles and the jaw-dropping Tesla Cybertruck, but there's even more fascinating stuff happening. Imagine a car that can actually repair itself. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi film, right? But research is currently underway to develop materials that can heal their own scratches and dents. For instance, scientists are working on polymers that can self-repair when exposed to heat or light. This means fewer trips to the body shop and less hassle for car owners. The journey of cars is far from over, and the future holds some truly exciting concepts. Imagine flying cars gliding above the traffic. They've existed in prototypes since the 1950s, but we're still waiting for them to become practical. Companies like PAL-V and Terrafugia are working on these dream machines, which could make our daily commutes much faster and far more thrilling. Then there's the Hyperloop, a high-speed transportation system proposed by Elon Musk. This concept envisions pods traveling in low-pressure tubes, reaching speeds of up to 760 miles an hour. Imagine getting from New York to Washington, D.C. in just 30 minutes. This evolution in transport not only shows that the automotive journey is just beginning, but also raises a shocking question. Will the cars we know today become obsolete in the next decade? What do you think? Share your thoughts with us down in the comment section below. And if you're intrigued by the fascinating world of history and technology, be sure to subscribe to Mr. History for more mind-blowing content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.